All right, today we're jumping into a fight, a really big one, for the very soul of our landscape. And it's a conflict I bet you've never thought about before. We're pitting an unlikely hero of the ecosystem against, well, the massive power of modern finance.
Let's kick things off with this pretty wild statement from rewilder Peter Smith. He actually calls the beaver an agent of land theft. I mean, that sounds crazy, right? A thief? But as you're about to find out, not all thieves are the same. And sometimes, yeah, you need a thief to catch a thief.
And here you can see the two sides of this story laid out perfectly. You've got the beaver's theft, which is, well, it's more like an act of ecological justice, right? It's taking land back for nature, totally ignoring the lines we humans draw on maps. But then, on the other side, you have the banker's theft, this green grab thing. It's all about packaging up the wild into financial assets, which is just the latest version of a story that's been going on for centuries. Okay, so let's really get into this clash between the beaver and the banker. You know, the first thing we've got to wrap our heads around is this. The beautiful green countryside we see, it's not some untouched natural paradise, not at all. It's basically the scar tissue from 1,000 years of political fights. Every single fence, every hedgerow, it's a mark left behind from a battle over who got to use the land and who was literally locked out. And to really get why conservation is having such a hard time today, we have to go back, way back, because this isn't a new problem. Nope, it's just the latest chapter in a really, really long story of land theft. So here's the story, basically on fast forward. Before 1066, a lot of the land was what they called the commons. It wasn't really owned by anyone. It was defined by how the community used it. Then, bam, the Norman conquest. All land suddenly belongs to the king. A few centuries later, you get the dissolution of the monasteries, which privatizes a massive chunk of England. But the real death blow, the final nail in the coffin for the commons, was something called parliamentary enclosure. This is where the wealthy elite literally wrote laws that let them grab common land for themselves. Wild, right?
So the big thing to get here is that this idea we have today, that you can just own a piece of the earth forever, what's called an absolute freehold. That wasn't how things always were. It's a legal fiction. It was a tool, a concept invented specifically to tear down the old system of the commons and make massive private ownership possible.
And what was the result of all this? Well, it's pretty staggering. A concentration of land ownership that is just hard to believe. By 1873, less than 5% of the people owned pretty much all of the land. Think about that. That is the foundation for the mess we're in today. Okay, so now let's connect the dots. How does all that history create a massive headache for anyone who cares about nature today? Well, that brings us to what's called the conservation paradox. It's what happens when all our good intentions run smack into a totally broken system. I mean, it sounds completely backward, doesn't it? Let's say you donate money to a charity to save some beautiful piece of nature. You think you're doing a good thing. But what if that very act actually makes it harder to save the next piece of nature? And here's the brutal reality. Just look at this number. Since 1990, the actual purchasing power of conservation charities, it's just collapsed. We're talking by over 90%. A donation that could have bought a huge chunk of land for nature 30 years ago? Today, it buys you a tiny, tiny fraction of that. Their money has just been eaten alive by a crazy land market. And this is the trap laid out step by step. Charities work hard to raise money. They go into the market to try and buy land, but that just sends a huge signal to speculators that this land is valuable. So what happens? The demand inflates prices for everyone, and the next time the charity wants to buy some land, it's even more expensive. It's like they're trying to run up a down escalator, and the escalator just keeps getting faster. And this quote, man, it just puts the heartbreaking reality right out there. A donation today makes it harder to protect wildlife tomorrow. The very system we're using to try and save nature is actually feeding the beast that's making it harder. It's a vicious cycle.
So, okay, if the system itself is the problem, then just throwing more money at it, that's not going to work. You can't fix it with more donations. You have to change the actual rules of the game. You need something fundamental, a real correction.
And the solution being put forward here is something called a land value tax, or LVT. Now, this is a really important idea to grasp. It's not a tax on the buildings on the land. It's a tax on the value of the location itself, the land underneath everything. So picture this, two identical houses. One is right in the middle of a bustling city, the other's out in the middle of nowhere. The land under the city house is obviously way more valuable, so it would pay a higher tax. This makes it really expensive to just hoard valuable land and do nothing with it. And it makes sense when you think about it, right?
When a new school or a train station gets built, or a neighborhood just becomes a cool place to be, land values shoot through the roof. But who actually created that value? The community did. But who gets to cash in? The landowner, who might not have done a thing. A land value tax just says, hey, that wealth the community created, it should probably go back to the community.
And believe it or not, this is not some brand new radical idea. Get this, here's Winston Churchill, all the way back in 1909, making the exact same point. He saw it crystal clear. Landlords just sit there while the value of their land goes up thanks to everyone else's hard work, and they don't contribute a thing to it.
Okay, so what on earth does all this economic talk have to do with our friend the beaver? Well, this is where it all clicks into place. This is where we get a new deal, not just for us, but for nature too.
Just look at how an LVT completely flips the script. In the current system, hoarding land is smart. It's profitable. With an LVT, it becomes a costly liability. But check out that middle row. This is the kicker. Right now, if a beaver floods part of your land, that's a financial nightmare. But under an LVT, because the commercial value of that land just dropped, it actually lowers your tax bill.
And this just brings it all home. Our little thief, the beaver, gets a whole new role. In the old system, it's a vandal, wrecking a valuable financial asset. But in an LVT system, that same beaver suddenly becomes a source of relief, literally lowering the landowner's tax bill. The entire economic reason to fight against rewilding just evaporates.
So what's the big picture here? The ultimate goal is a total shift in how we think about land. Moving away from this idea of private monopoly, of just owning a piece of the planet, and moving towards something more like communal stewardship, where the land is managed for the good of everyone, community and ecosystem, for the long haul.
And really, that's the big question I want to leave you with. Just imagine it. What if our entire economy was set up to reward people for restoring nature, for actually healing the land, instead of just rewarding them for owning it? What kind of world would that be?